This is the Bahamas Tonight, the Northern Edition. Good evening, I'm Sabrina Brown. It's great to have you with us. Topping the news tonight, the nation's leader presenting the 2013-2014 budget communication to Parliament today. In the multifaceted presentation, Prime Minister the Right Honourable Perry Christie reaffirmed the government's commitment to various sectors, including health, education and national security. Shashina Roll has the story.
The nation's chief says that this is a pivotal budget in the history of such a small nation that will secure the future for all Bahamians. While the Right Honourable Perry Christie adds that there has been steady, ongoing economic growth and the employment conditions improved nationally in 2012, there are some areas of concern on Grand Bahama.
Department of Statistics survey estimates that between May and November of 2012, the national unemployment rate fell to 14% from 14.7%. That is also down 2 full points from the peak of 15.9% in November 2011. However, labor force developments in Grand Bahama and among our youth was still less encouraging and remain, therefore, areas of clear, ongoing public policy concern.
He says in excess of $8 million will be allocated to the police force to increase its manpower by 450 officers.
More specifically, in the next fiscal year, the force will more than triple the size of its recruitment and training class to 100 officers from the usual complement of 30. As well as we will begin a 5-year process to invest approximately $175 million in the modernization of the marine fleet and harbor facilities of the Defense Force in order to better patrol our seas and borders, protect our marine resources, and strengthen our capacity to respond to natural disasters throughout the Family Islands.
Christie says its government is committed to higher educational standards, adding that the government will double the amount of funds allocated to education in the last budget and triple it in the year before.
My government has allocated, in the context of the country's strategy agreed with the Caribbean Development Bank, over $30 million for education, and this will be primarily directed towards special education and the transition of the College of the Bahamas to university status.
Shashina Roll, ZNS Network News.
Weather officials say the potential for hazardous weather, including flooding, over portions of our northern islands will continue into Friday. However, they note that conditions are improving here in Grand Bahama. Nonetheless, residents in flood-prone areas are warned not to drive, walk, or play in floodwaters, as the depth can easily be misjudged. All efforts should be made to protect lives and property. The country has recorded heavy rainfall recently, and with more rain on the way, many homeowners are now giving consideration to flood insurance. As Megan Shepard tells us, an expert in the field says flood insurance undoubtedly saves the homeowner in the long run.
During Hurricane Wilma in 2005, this thoroughfare leading into the Hawksbill community was completely flooded. And just last week, residents in New Providence experienced the same fate. Now, as Grand Bahama is currently under a flood warning, Donald Ward of Insurance Management is encouraging residents to be proactive in protecting your family's home and valuables.
You can always do that during hurricane season as well, protecting valuables by putting it up high. But what is to say that what you put it on will not collapse and it still falls into the water if your home is flooded? Because if the water gets in, it's going to take a little while to get out. So protecting your valuables from a flood is almost as likened to protecting it from theft. You never know what's going to happen, even if you make certain moves or efforts. My advice is simply get something, so that if you live in an area that is likely to get flood anytime in the future, because you only need to get flooded once and it can cost you a fortune, you know, my suggestion would be buy something that will cover at least the bare minimum for your property, for your asset.
Ward says there are 2 types of packages that can protect your home: flooding as a result of a hurricane, or the type of flooding we have been experiencing as of late due to torrential rain.
It will never happen to me type thing. If it does happen, chances are only my rug will be damaged. These are misconceptions. So usually, floods almost have a mind of its own, okay, or their own, as the case may be. So the misconceptions, I think, are kind of thinning out because we are seeing it happen to our neighbors.
He says we can no longer sit back and believe flooding cannot happen or that damage will be minimal at best. Regardless if persons secure valuables up high, he says electrical failure is almost inevitable.
It is unprecedented. It's unusual, and to a lot of people, it's foreign to them. So I'm suggesting that to protect your interests at the very least against this type of torrential rain, a cheap insurance, well, I say cheap, but nothing is really cheap, but some type of insurance that will cover these minimal perils.
Megan Shepard, ZNS Network News.
Thanks, Megan. The Department of Marine Resources continuing its series of town meetings on possible changes to the Fisheries Act. The meetings moved to Grand Bahama last night, where local fishermen assembled at the Foster B. Pastena Center for the first in a series of meetings. Christopher Hadley, a consultant with the department, outlined some of the areas up for discussion.
We've had, I would say, mixed views in our consultations on the idea in particular of a new license for individual fishermen. So in addition to any license you might need for a boat, and maybe we can extend that licensing as well, the requirement that every individual fisherman should have a license is one of the things we're putting out as a possibility. Or maybe sports fishermen, we should have a specific license for the sports fishing sector.
Members of the panel say there is nothing written in stone and the issues discussed are not necessarily recommendations but just ideas for debate. Enforcement and administrative penalty is another issue for discussion.
It would work in really exactly the same way as a road traffic offence, a speeding ticket. And what would happen is if a fisheries officer or an enforcement officer believed that somebody was committing an offence and they had some evidence for that, it's not just a question of them having a suspicion, they have to have evidence in the normal way. Then instead of starting a prosecution and taking the person to court, which is the only option at the moment, the person would be offered an alternative, which would be to pay this sort of fixed penalty amount.
The consultative meeting will move to the Mary Magdalene Parish Hall in West End and the High Rock School tonight. A similar meeting will be held in Abaco tomorrow night. Stay with us. The Bahamas Tonight Northern Edition is coming right back.